And we are there.
Hey, we're live.
Yes, we are live with Savage Tim. We have a lot of great news coming out of the wonderful world of Pinnacle Entertainment, the makers of the Savage Worlds line. The Lankhmar line is finally here. You can pre-order the materials, and Savage Tim has his hands on the PDFs. Tim,
Yes.
does it live up to your expectations? You've been a fan for a long time of the source material. Does it do justice? Does it carry that feel that you've been expecting?
Absolutely, it does. I've been reading through it. I'm about halfway through the main book right now, and I'm loving every minute of it. There are some really great additions that they've made to the line. They've added a couple of really good edges and setting rules that I think do a really good job of capturing the feel of Lankhmar. And it actually also it also gives me a really good old school D&D vibe. The kind of D&D that I sort of grew up playing, where it was very dark, it was very gritty, there wasn't a lot of magic involved, there wasn't a lot of positive things that were happening. So I got a really good old school classic box D&D vibe from the thing. So I highly recommend checking it out right now. It's available. They're setting pre-order for the hard copies, but you can also order the PDFs right now.
All right. And how does Savage Worlds, the system, lend itself to this? What neat things did you see without like blowing away people's reading is in there that lends this mechanics of Savage Worlds to the setting?
The nice thing is that Savage Worlds, as it was designed, is a pretty dark, pretty gritty setting in the first place. If you don't include magic too much, it can be a real challenge to play through. It really is a pulpy type game, and this is really that classic pulp feel. The thing I love about it is that there's some really good setting rules that have done a good job of doing it. For example, there are rules about they've incorporated some of the knockout blow rules you've seen from Deadlands Noir, where if somebody has the drop on you, you have to make a vigor check or you're knocked unconscious. If you are wearing no armor, if you're an unarmored hero, which classic pulp tales and classic pulp tradition, you didn't wear a whole lot of armor. They didn't have a whole lot of chain mail and plate mail, that sort of thing. So what they do for this is that if you're not wearing any armor, you get +2 to any soak roll. So you are much less likely to stay damaged. And if you do get damaged, you make a healing recovery roll every day. Of course, Savage Worlds is every 5 days. Here, every day. It gets translated to a different wound type. In bumps and bruises, knocks on the head, that sort of thing, you recover from those in a couple of hours, no matter where they came from.
So it's much more pulpy. It's much more forgiving.
I think you're going to see a lot more action. I think you're going to see a lot more combat. I think you're going to see a lot more fighting styles and that kind of play, because there's fewer reasons not to fight. It's way easier to heal. It's way easier to get to recover from your damage. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of talking going on in the Lankhmar game. I think you're going to see a lot of combat, which is a good thing, especially considering some of the more recent rules changes as well. But getting back to Lankhmar, they're also added stats for a couple of new races. They're handling nationalities as races, so depending on where your character grew up determines the kind of human you become. So if you're your Lankhmar native, you get one set of abilities. If you're from a northerner, from the barbarian tribes up north, you're going to have a different set of abilities that more closely match your background. So that's just a quick sample of the kind of things they've added in, and they've added new races too. They've added ratlings, who are humans who have a rat background, because there's an intelligent race of were-rats that live under the streets of Lankhmar, and you can be part rat as a part of that character, but you can also be one of the Nawan ghouls. Nawan ghouls are really nifty. It's one of the things I loved about the original stories is they're not like the ghouls of classic myth. They are actually sentient creatures whose skin is translucent. You can see completely through them and see their organs and their skeletons inside this sort of strange misty form. And that's a playable character. You can actually be that guy. And they of course have abilities that back up that type of vision. So I think you're going to see some really cool characters come out of this. I think that they've given a lot of background to make characters in that Lankhmar style. I can't wait. I'm already making plans. I'm going to be running this soon. I'm going to be doing something with it.
Are we going to see this at Queen City?
We probably will be seeing this at Queen City. I always like to run new hot games, the new hot session at the local convention. So this one's right on the top of the list. So I'm right now kind of mulling over a couple of ideas. So good times.
Yeah. You made the allusion to some recent changes in the rules. Would you like to, for those that haven't checked the forums lately,
Yeah, for those of you who don't read the forums, there's been a fairly major rule change that has been introduced. I haven't had a chance to play with it just yet, so I'm going to kind of reserve judgment. I think it's a good thing. But what's happened is that they released a rules modification involving how soaking damage works, or how recovering from shaken works, I should say. Prior to this, in every version of Savage Worlds I played, in order to recover from shaken, you had to make a spirit roll on your action. If you succeed, you remove the shaken condition, but still lose your action. If you succeed with a raise, you get your action as normal. The change is that they're removing the raise condition. So now what happens is that when you roll to recover from shaken, as long as you make the roll, you may act as normal. Wow, that's a huge change.
That is huge.
It's a gigantic change as far as the math is concerned. It's a big difference. I sat down and I did the math a little bit last week. I was playing with the numbers, and it basically triples your chances of success. Or it greatly increases the chance of success by a large factor, a huge factor, like a wide factor. And so, of course, there was a lot of discussion about why did this happen? Why did they decide to make this change? And the main reason was that one of the design philosophies in Savage Worlds was that NPCs should have one of three states, either up, down, or off the table. And they realized that the way the shaken rule was written, they actually had introduced a fourth one, where the characters either up, they were off the table, they were down, or they were not quite up but not quite down. Now that's not such a big deal when you're a player and a player character and you only have one person to worry about. But when you're a game master and you have, say, 6 or 7 guys in the combat that you're trying to control, trying to remember which one of those made their shaken roll this round and which ones didn't would slow down combat too much.
I run most of my Savage Worlds things on Roll20, where I can put the shaken and put a mark there to symbolize that right on the item. But when I took the game over into the conventions, I began seeing that was a hassle about, wait a minute, who does that? Or, oh, well, I forgot about that. Oh, what's going on?
Right.
I can see definitely how that'll help.
So they're going to cut that down a bit. The other thing to look out for, I think, is that to keep an eye out for the certain abilities that will give you a bonus to recover from shaken. So combat reflexes is one, which is an edge. The undead and construct abilities, those each all give you +2 to recover from shaken. So that's going to make it, though, it's going to make a whole squad of skeletons or zombies a real challenge, because they're not going to stay shaken for very long at all. They'll only stay shaken if they roll a 1. And that's not going to be easy. They're not going to stay shaken for very long. You better plan things better. And that's another advantage, too, is that it's going to force players to be more interactive, to coordinate their attacks and coordinate their actions more in depth. And they're also not going to have to spend their bennies so frequently, because usually what ends up happening, I'm sure you've seen this, is I'm on my action, I get shaken. On my action, I roll to recover. I don't make it, so I spend the benny. Now I can act as normal. Well, I'm short of benny. I can't use it for something cool later on. That's not so much fun. So,
I have played with it. Did my Octon Cthulhu, Indiana Jones, and did a Deadlands Noir session since the rule. And I found, that definitely the PCs were never staying shaken, but the minion German soldiers, they were never acting once they got knocked into shaken mode. Right.
Exactly. So that way it's going to make things a little bit more challenging. And it doesn't seem, they've run some, one of the guys from the forums, a guy named Zadmar is his handle. I don't know what he goes by, but he's run some simulations, and he found out that there's only a very slight advantage over time, where it gives the wildcat a slight advantage over similarly statted NPC. So it shouldn't be that big of a change as far as the rules are concerned, but it's going to make for a different game experience, I think.
And less stress on the GM, which is always a good thing for the players.
Oh, yes. It's good for everybody.
Very true. Also, the next thing, the announcement for the Sixth Gun, based on it's a comic series that you are familiar with.
Very much
For
so.
those of us who are not familiar with this, what is the Sixth Gun? Don't we already have a Weird West thing? What's going on?
The Sixth Gun is. I was really excited when I found out about this because I was a big fan of the book. I was a big fan of Deadlands, and then when I found out that there was another comic book series that was another Weird Western, I was all over it. So I snagged it right off the bat just to check it out, and I was very impressed. The basic idea behind the Sixth Gun is that there are the six magical firearms. The six pistols, the six guns of the title. Each one has a certain special power. And they're all listed in detail in the issues. Each one can do different things. One explodes like a cannonball. One, whatever you shoot, comes back from the dead. That sort of thing. So each one has these dark, dangerous powers. And what's happening is that there's an evil bad guy, as there always is, who wants to collect all six of these to do terrible, terrible things to people. And of course, there's heroes trying to stop him. But even the heroes aren't really all that heroic. They have their own dark pasts. So it's a very interesting combination. There's a lot of mystic and magic involved. There's a lot of ancient legends and power. It's related to the ancient myths of the Templars and that sort of thing. And it brings in all sorts of this deep mythology. It's really well done. It's really fantastic. I can't recommend the series enough. So when they found out that Pinnacle was going to get the license, I'm like, oh my God, that's fantastic. And even Shane had said, he said that do we really need to do another Weird Western? We already have Deadlands. And then he thought about it. He said, well, who better to do a Weird Western than Pinnacle? They've been doing it for 20 years. Right. Nobody else knows the genre that well. And not only is it a good licensing bargain because, hey, more people buying books is always good. But also you can use the Sixth Gun material as background detail for your Deadlands campaign. I know several people who have kind of taken the comics on their own. Our buddy Drew, as a matter of fact, and he lifted stuff wholesale out of the Sixth Gun and just put it into his Deadlands campaign. Because why not? Right. That's the way you do things. So there are several books in this series. They're available in trade paperbacks. If you're a fan of Weird West, I definitely recommend checking out. But the reason why that's a good news is that by the end of the month, we're going to be seeing a Kickstarter for the Sixth Gun book, and that's going to be out very, very soon. They're already starting to release some preview information from it. We're seeing title pages and artwork and that sort of thing. So I can't wait for it. This is going to be a big, exciting one. I like the fact that they're doing this.
Nice. So keep your eye on the Pinnacle forums and on their Facebook page for information about the launch of the Kickstarter. Now, the other big thing we've seen with that they've been marketing is they've been really trying to push a tie-in with the Mad Max movie that's out with their Deadlands Hell on Earth line. How are you thinking about that? Is this marketing genius? Is this perfect? Are you happy just to have Hell on Earth in the spotlight again?
Oh, very much so. Hell on Earth is one of those settings that kind of really doesn't get a whole lot of attention. I don't really know why. I think kind of apocalypse stories sort of fell by the wayside a little bit. They weren't really that popular in modern culture. You don't really see a whole lot of post-apocalypse stories that are making big waves. But now Mad Max Fury Road just came out this past weekend and did very, very well. Has been a critical darling across the board. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 98%. 98% critical success. Only 2 negative reviews they've been able to find. And 94% on the audience tracking. So it's huge audience tracking. And it's still lost to Pitch Perfect 2, but I'm not complaining.
And we also have another post-apocalyptic like thing. The Dark Tower is back out of pre-production hell and possibly coming through again.
Is it?
Yep, it looks like Sony is going to spearhead it.
Nice. So anyway, to tie into the release of Mad Max Fury Road, Pinnacle put together a really generous bundle of Hell on Earth books. So I'm looking at the bundle right now. You can get the core book, the Hell on Earth Reloaded, which is a big, fat, 350 page.
Yes.
Is it 350 pages? I don't know. 200 pages. 200 page book, full color, glossy cover. You can get the Hell on Earth Reloaded, Hell on Earth Companion, Hell on Earth Worm's Turn, which is their plot point campaign for the Hell on Earth setting, the Player's Guide, which you can then print out and hand out to your players, the GM's inserts, and the soundtrack album. All this stuff in hardcover and PDF, $75.
How can you turn that down?
Oh, it's an amazing deal. It's an amazing deal, especially because the core book alone, the hardcover copy of the core book, is $40 by itself, and the hard copies of the companion, the Worm's Turn, that's another $50 right there. So already $75, you got a deal. You got a bargain right going on there. So it's really worth grabbing onto. And to tie into that, they're going to be doing a miniature bundle as well that you can get from the Pinnacle site. So they've got a miniature group where you can get the Hell on Earth version of everybody's favorite bad guy Stone, and the Hell on Earth version of Hellstrom. Haha. Didn't think he was still around, did you? Well, guess what? Spoilers. But even if you don't use him as Hellstrom, he's a really cool, like, pulpy robot dude. So he's worthwhile having. Previously, those were only Kickstarter exclusives. You couldn't get them otherwise. But now they're available right through the Pinnacle store while supplies last. So, in addition to those two, you can also get a grab bag of 3 other miniatures from the Hell on Earth line for $40, which is a pretty sweet deal.
Very neat.
So, 5 minis for $40. And one of them, like I said, the Hellstrom one's big. He's a huge dude. He's like that big. He's a gigantic guy. I unfortunately discovered I already have them. So I forgot. I backed in the Kickstarter. I'm like, oh wait, I have those guys already. Oh shit. No.
But it reminded you had them. That's what it's worth.
Yeah, well, I have them already. But I encourage people to pick them up. They were made from and cast by Bob Dolphy, I want to say, from Reaper Miniatures. Mm-hmm. So they're really nice sculpts, really nice little figures, and definitely worth checking out. Even if you're not going to be playing Hell on Earth, but they make great post-apocalypse characters for any post-apocalyptic game.
And Rodolphe did the Deadlands Noir ones, which he didn't get to see at UBCon, but my brother-in-law finished painting them and did an amazing job on those.
Oh yeah, nice.
I gotta get those just for you to see. They're just incredible.
No, good job. The one I like is check out, if you go to the Reaper Miniatures website, check out what they did with them, because they did something I wish I'd thought of. They painted them in noir colors, so they're black and white, and they look like stepped just out of a black and white film. They're so pretty.
Yeah,
I'm so jealous. They look so good.
The other thing about the Mad Max thing, that I heard one review coming out that I haven't gotten to see it yet, that the whole movie is like a chase scene. Mm-hmm. And that made me think about the chase scenes in Savage Worlds and how the chase rules have evolved over the years. How do you feel about the evolution of the chase scene and your advice for people running chases?
There have been a lot of different evolutions of the chase rules, and they keep updating them and changing them as time goes on. I really like the current version of it. It takes a little bit of work to kind of get your head around the concept of it. To review real quick, in a chase scene, every character has to make a piloting check. So they're either going to make a driving roll if they're behind the wheel of a car, a piloting roll if they're in an airplane, an agility roll if they're on foot, that sort of thing. For every successive raise you draw 1 card from the initiative deck. If you draw high enough, then that's the initiative order you go into, and then you pick whichever one you're going to use. So what happens is that you do the initiative count as normal. If you are within, let's see if I can make sure I can remember this right. The highest card has advantage over any card that's lower than itself. And you apply the benefits of a different range class depending on the value of the card that's been drawn. It's a very complicated way of saying it. There's a little chart that explains exactly what the modifiers are, and they treat them as range modifiers. So obviously they're modified by anything that applies to range. If something has advantage over you, you are unable to attack that target. So example might be a dogfight. Let's say, space fighters or World War I planes, that sort of thing. If I have a higher card than you do, then I have advantage, which means that my vehicle must be behind your vehicle. I've somehow maneuvered myself to get behind you. I can shoot at you with impunity, but you are unable to return fire because I'm out of your range. You've got to hope that your next turn you pilot better and can get advantage against me, so you can attack in turn. If you can kind of understand that concept, you can more easily see what's really going on. A lot of people kind of get hung up with who's in front of who or who's as close to who. If you think of it more abstractly, more as idea of positioning or range from you to one target, it makes a little bit more sense, and I think it makes things more clear. Also, it means that there's only very particular settings and situations that you're going to want to use those rules. If you've got more than one person fighting on top of a train, well, that's not a chase scene. They're fighting on top of a train. That's a dangerous environment. It's not a chase. But if they're in different vehicles or two trains running parallel, then you want to bring up those rules.
I've got a thing coming up in my North game coming up where it's an Indianapolis 500 race, and one of the PCs is the patent scientist who specialized in cars, and I was like, what better for him than to be a ride-along mechanic? How would you run it? Would you run it as a chase scene or as a very large mass combat?
I think I would probably run that as that's a good question. Depends how many combatants are we talking about, or how many other people are in the chase.
I'm giving basically five name cars, and the rest are just faceless minions that are like, hey, this guy gets run off the road, or I almost hit you, and things, but isn't a possibility to win. And I'm trying to work it in for the mass combat of where instead of for rolling your soak or vigor to keep control, the mechanic is responsible for rolling his repair or weird science in order to do that.
I might actually use I would probably use the chase rules for that. Largely because with mass combat, you're really looking at conflicts between two different sides. This is designed for two different armies who are facing each other on the battlefield. And it's supposed to represent time, long periods of time, hours. Usually what I do is the way I run mass battles is I'll have them declare each battle turn, each time they roll it, as being a 12-hour period. So they can get an idea of time passing. It's not just a 6-second combat round, it's a battle round, which takes hours to complete, of troop movements and siege machines moving into place and people being rescued and that sort of thing. And so it takes long periods of time for those to complete. With the chase, though, you want to keep that very short, quick pace of a race. I would probably use something like the chase rules. I definitely think that would be something I would anticipate. Possibly what I would do is say, what you might do is do dramatic tasks instead. Instead of doing the chase rules, because really what it is that the object of a race is that your group wants to cross the finish line before everybody else does. So the first people to collect the requisite number of successes are the ones who succeed in the race.
I like that a lot better.
They're the ones who have actually finished. That way you can easily run it for multiple groups, and each one's going to have slightly different chance of pulling forward or pulling up. And hey, maybe at the end of things, some no-name mook explodes 6 times and winds up blowing across the finish line in front of everybody else. Then what do you do?
Then you have a new hero.
Exactly. What are you going to do now? Smart guy.
And any advice for like the Mad Max scenario of where the chase scene is the campaign? I mean, what advice would you give for people who are trying to make the adventure the chase?
That's a really good question. I think that the key to remember with the chase scenes is that, for one thing, it can't always be a chase. You do have to make sure that you build in places where the characters can stop and take a breath, rest a bit, and then be forced to move further and further on. One thing to take a look at.
Do an interlude.
Exactly. It'd be a great place to do an interlude. And actually, what I would recommend, too, is taking a look at, I think it might still be available. Let me check. There was a scenario that they had published a while back called Zombie Run, which is a post-apocalyptic game. Oh, look, it is still available in PDF for $8, $8. PDF, you can't beat it. Zombie Run is a mini campaign, and it's a post-apocalyptic game, but it's set in a zombie apocalypse, where the player characters have a group of dudes who are they're in New York City. They discover that things are going bad, and they decide they need to break out west. And they decide to head out that direction, and the further west they go, the more strange things they run into. It definitely has that kind of post-apocalyptic vibe. I ran it for a little while, and it worked very well. And there's a lot of really good advice in there about how to use different, not only interludes rules, but also introducing little vignettes along the road to keep things interesting and exciting. I would recommend taking a look at that and seeing how you can tie that into the current iteration of the chase rules.
Could that be used with Hell on Earth, or is the setting a little too different for that to work?
I think you could use it with Hell on Earth. All you'd have to do would be to pull out. You could just take out the zombies and put in mutants. Really, I think it would be fairly easy to do so. The only difference would be picking two different endpoints, because obviously you're not going to be coming from out east, because out east isn't there anymore. So, but it was totally doable.
Okay. And the last thing I'd like to talk to you about, I'm at the point in my Deadlands campaign, my Deadlands Noir, where the players are all legendary.
Mhm.
They are, for summoning helper characters, they're summoning gods in taking the form of animals at this point, because they're legendary and they're fighting other gods at this stage. So it's like, okay, you can't, there's not much room for advancing, raising it higher at this point. So how do you, when you realize you're near the end, what are the steps you take for bringing things to a satisfying end,
Right.
and not making the players think that you're abandoning them?
Right. Well, the first thing to keep in mind too is that there is still a lot. You can still have a very involved, detailed, and fulfilling campaign, even when your Savage Worlds characters are legendary. I've run campaigns well into legendary and beyond. I think with my 50 Fathoms campaign, they were over 100 experience points by the time we were done, which is deep, deep legendary territory. And you can still have an exciting campaign. But the question you have to ask yourself is, have I accomplished what I wanted this campaign to be about? And the things you want to look for are, what's my overarching story? What's my meta plot? Is it about a lich invading my little medieval kingdom? Okay, has the lich been defeated? If yes, then the campaign is probably well on its way to being over. So is it about a demon ravaging the countryside? If yes, well, then if he's gone, we're pretty much over. Once you've established that that's the end game for the campaign, then it's easy to tell when you're done. The other thing to look for too is, are there any unresolved side plots or subplots that you haven't finished up yet? Are there still missing NPCs from a player character's background that they haven't talked about? Have they restored their family's honor? Have they found the ancestral weapon that was missing so long ago? If they've met all those little goals, it's probably time to start wrapping up. And I usually try pacing things so that the subplots are completed before the big climax occurs. Then once the big climax occurs, now we have a reason to wrap the campaign and celebrate a little bit about finding the end of a very long, very involved campaign.
What are the steps for that? For how do you do for alerting the players on things that were at the end game? How do you prepare them from in that role of the GM as parent figure?
A parent figure and game facilitator? Well, it's largely just being honest. It's being straightforward with the player and saying, okay, and most groups, they'll recognize it too. You say, okay, we've done this, we've accomplished these things. This is where I planned the campaign to end. Do you think this is a good place for us to stop? Or is there more stuff you'd like to see? They may surprise you and say, I really like this character. I want to keep going. What happens if? And they may pitch another follow-up campaign idea. Or they may agree with you and say, you're absolutely right. I've done everything I wanted my character to do. You've done everything you want your characters to do. Let's wrap it up after this, and we'll move on to something else. Some groups have a little bit of gamer EDD that way. It's, yeah, that was neat. Let's do the next thing. Let's play the next game. Let's try the next thing. And always leave things open in case you ever want to go back there. I ran 2 different separate but connected Deadlands Noir campaigns. One set in New Orleans in the 1930s. The second one set in San Fran. I always say that wrong. Shanfen in the 1940s. Or late 1930s. So the 2 of them were connected, the same PCs, and I just had them travel across country because they were running away from the guys who showed up in the first campaign. So it worked really, really well, and it was very well regarded. But at the same time, by the time we had gotten to the big plot point and we got into the end of the climax of the campaign, we all recognized that there wasn't much juice left there. There wasn't really a reason to keep going. It was time to wrap things up. So, excellent. Like I said, most players will recognize it too.
Yeah, my players are recognizing the big things are about to be wrapped up, if not wrapped up. And I'm gonna throw in a quick run through the south of the border campaign for Deadlands, so they can fight a super god thing, and actually realize they've had a huge effect. And they've already, through the Indianapolis adventure, are now filthy rich after taking this corporation's money. So that whole buying off that hindrance was definitely a huge part of wrapping up their story arcs. Anything else, Tim, on the Savage World that we should talk about?
I think that's pretty much covered it on the Savage World's end. How's your Gen Con looking? Do you get your events signed up?
I am not actually going this year. Originally, I had promised my wife that she would get a vacation this year instead of me going off for the last 5 years. So that was happening, and then with the car going, we're not too sure about
good point.
about the realistics of that. But this just gives me more time to do writing and get stuff released on my materials.
That's a damn shame. I, on the other hand, am going to Gen Con this year, having missed last year. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm taking part in Mark's bus tour, Mark's Gen Con party bus trip.
It's a lot of fun.
Which is going to be leaving from Buffalo Wednesday morning. We're going to be driving down to Indianapolis. We're spending the whole weekend down there. I scored a great hotel room that's costing me an arm and a leg. But that's okay. We're not really talking about that.
I thought you were going to run the D&D.
I'm not. No. I don't run games at Gen Con. No, thank you very much. No, I like running games at Gen Con, but it's too much. It's going to be, I think it'll be too difficult. If I'm taking the bus down, I think I'm going to have a hard time getting my gear down there with me. So I don't want to go through the hassle. And, you know me, I like my toys.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really leave stuff behind. It would break my heart. So I'm going to pack.
It's a place where you showcase. You don't leave things behind for that.
Exactly. You don't want. You got to bring your A game. If you're not bringing your A game, who cares? But actually, I signed up. I was lucky enough to sign up for. I was able to get into a couple of Savage Worlds events.
Ooh, which ones?
Which I'm doing a Weird Wars role. I'm doing a superhero game based in City of Heroes, the City of Heroes universe. Mm-hmm. From the MMO that came out a while ago, which I was a big fan of. I played it for a long time. And I'm also playing in. I'm doing another fantasy one. And what was the fourth one? I thought I had signed up for a fourth event, and I can't remember right now what it was. I'm bugging me now.
Is it being run by any of the Pinnacle staff? Any of those,
no,
any events that you're going to go to from the Pinnacle group?
I am planning on attending their seminar. Which I like to go to every year to find out what's new and exciting. They're actually going to be doing 2 hours worth of seminar this year. The first hour is going to be dedicated to Pinnacle and what their plans are for going forward. And the second hour is going to be dedicated to the licensees to find out what they're doing, which I think is a great thing. There's enough licensees out there right now. They kind of need their own time. But the nice thing is that they're going to be right up against each other. So same room and everything. I don't have to move, which is always good for me. And so that's the one that's one I'm really looking forward to seeing, because that's always got some interesting stuff in it. Let's see here. That's the fantasy one. I'm trying to remember what that was. Oh, there was a Steamscapes one, which another new setting, another one of the licensees. They're doing a steampunk type setting. So I was really interested in seeing how they did that. I don't think it's even available yet, I want to say, but I wanted to check it out and see how they handle things.
Very fun.
So I think it'll be fun.
So if you're at Gen Con, say hi to Savage Tim.
Yep, I will definitely be around.
Cool. And I will stop broadcast.